Well, welcome to this British Academy of Management Fellows Masterclass. It's going to be a webinar. Jean, Hartley and I will each ask Sir Cary Cooper a few questions. And after that, we encourage you to ask questions. So keep a note of them or put them in the Q&A function and keep them brief. We have participants from all over the world, so we'll try to avoid being too UK-centric. And at the end of the session, Fiona Wilson, Dean of the Fellows College, will have the last word. Cary Cooper has a very long CV, which you can see online. And in the name of brevity, I'll say only that he's the 50th anniversary Professor of Organisational Psychology and Health at the Alliance Manchester Business School in Manchester Uni. He was the founding president of BAM and is a past president of the Chartered Institute of Personnel and Development. He's president of the Institute of Welfare. He was chair of the Academy of Social Sciences and of the Sunningdale Institute and National School of Government. He was the founding editor of the Journal of Organisational Behaviour and is editor of the Wiley Encyclopedia of Management. He's the author or editor of more than 250 books in the field of occupational health psychology, workplace well-being, women at work, and occupational stress. He's been an advisor to international agencies on occupational health and well-being, and he was awarded a knighthood for his contribution to the social sciences. And to open the questioning, I'm going to hand over now to Jean Hartley, who's Emeritus Professor at the Open University, where she was Professor of Public Leadership. She did her PhD at Manchester with Cary as a supervisor. And Jean had worked earlier at Warwick Uni in organisational psychology, public leadership and management. Over to you, Jean.
Great. Thank you very much, Greg. And Cary, it's lovely to have this opportunity to talk with you today and discuss your career and your reflections on management, research and education. So starting off then, I'm going to ask you, you grew up in sunny California and then you came to the UK to do a PhD at Leeds University. And after that, you made the UK your home and you've stayed here since. So what prompted you to come to the UK? And also, given that you've got a foot in both camps of the USA and UK, do you have any reflections on UK management, education and research compared with the US? But first of all, what prompted you to come to the UK?
Okay, it wasn't the weather, by the way, Jean, as you know. No, to be honest with you, my closest friend in high school, at Fairfax High School, toward the end of it, and all the way through UCLA, when I went to UCLA, as the first one in my family ever to go to university. My parents were Eastern European Jews who left Romania and the Ukraine and so on. And so I met this guy and I loved England. I became part of his family. And so when I finished, I said, I have to go to England. And it just so happened that a professor, the head of the management department, it was a part of the economics faculty at Leeds University, was doing a visiting year at UCLA. And he said, would you like to come over when you're through with your MBA? I said, yeah, that'd be great. I'd love to come over, because my friend told me I knew about everything there was to know about England at the time. And so that's how I came over originally. I was only intending to stay for 1 year at this new management school, which then, by the way, demerged from the economics department, became a management studies school by itself. So that was, I guess, the motivation. And then I got offered an opportunity of doing a PhD, et cetera. And then it's, then I didn't have the money to get back to LA. So I stayed. No, it's not true. I love it here and always have loved it here. So it's my home. And I feel much more of an affinity here in also, I don't perceive myself, I know I sound American, but I don't perceive myself to be American in the same way. But I am a dual citizen because my parents came out and had my dad through the pogroms in Ukraine and my mother through the German invasion, the Jewish family in the First World War. So I have maintained my American citizenship as well. So I'm a dual citizen.
Yeah. And reflecting on US compared with UK management, education and research, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think we've become very Americanized recently, last decade or two. Last decade, I get the Academy of Management, I guess, has influenced that dramatically over the last couple of decades. I think we used to do our own research and didn't worry about metrics and didn't look at our U score or H score or whatever score you talk about in terms of publishing in 4-star journals and the rest of it. We used to just carry out on our own. And that's what I liked about doing a PhD here, by the way. So I could go right into it rather than have to take more courses. I already did courses for my MBA. I didn't need any more, but the American PhD systems, you have to take all these courses, exams, and the thesis that you do is minor, and in my view, in comparison to what you get in Europe generally. And I think we've moved a bit too far on the American line, and everything is all about publishing in 4-star journals. I think we, in a way, have lost our way, and I'm seeing we're coming back though, which is great news. So that 25% of the research, the REF, the Research Excellence Framework, that you get in the UK, where government looks every 4 or 5 years at the output, the 25% is now for impact. What impact are you making on policy, on practice? So I think that's a really good move. I think we're very buoyant here, and particularly into research. And I think the government's research assessment exercise, when it first started, now the REF, has helped to do that. But now I think it's become, I think it's too much focus on just 4-star publications and not doing other things that we should do in terms of communicating our science out there and making a difference.
Yeah. Thank you. And as Greg introduced you, we know you've got a long and very distinguished career, but we know that everybody makes mistakes at some point in their career. So I'd like to ask you a bit about 1 or 2 mistakes that you feel you've made, particularly with a view to helping others think about what did you learn from that, and what could others take from that?
I think I made a couple mistakes. I think one mistake I made is, it wasn't a mistake in a way, because I didn't know any better. When I was finishing my PhD off, I got headhunted to go to a psychology department in a university. And in those days, not now, because now psychology departments are very broad. It's not all experimental psychology. It's educational psychology, occupational psychology, clinical. In those days, that was, it was rats and pigs and, all those kinds of animals. In our place at that time, it was pigeons. Everybody was into pigeon research. I mean, honest to God, it was the wrong move for me. And I was the only social psychologist, the only person dealing with human beings. There was one other who was the educational psychologist, and a few on the periphery, a couple PhD students here and there, but almost all were experimental psychologists. And it was probably the wrong place for me to be at that time. Now psychology departments are very broad. They're great places. You get everything. And in those days, it was almost all male as well. Now it's almost all female psychology departments, oddly enough, because the subjects like social psychology, occupational psychology are really very prominent now. So that was a bit of a mistake, but it wasn't a mistake. I took the first, I got offered a job, took the job, stayed probably a little bit longer than I should have. I stayed 5 or 6 years, and then I was recruited to Manchester. And and my mentor there was the educational psychologist. Peter Robinson said to me, "Cary, you have to go. you have to go. And then I got headhunted to go to Manchester, and I'm glad I went. And I said, you should go to a management school. That's our lab, our organizations. That's our science, right? So, not pigeons and not rats, but, so in a way, it wasn't a mistake, but I stayed a little bit too long. I should have realized, but I was young.
And so it sounds like having a mentor or somebody who could speak to you and help direct your career, or not direct it, shape it, was quite valuable as a learning moment there.
Oh, Gene, you know that. I mean, that is critical. In my whole life, I've been very lucky. When I was at UCLA, the guy who knew people at Leeds who were doing similar research to UCLA, he said, you're going to England. He was a Viennese professor, Fred Mazur, fantastic guy. And he said, you will go off to England and you will experience life. And, you have to go away from the United States. You have to be a broader human being. And that was great. I've had one all my career. And honestly, it's made a difference. That's our job in a way. The people who are senior around this should know that when you get to a senior role, you get to a professorial role, your main responsibility, one of your main responsibilities should be looking after other people, the young academics who come. And that's our job. We've been helped along the way. So I think it's really important. Mentoring is critical. It's good to see the fellows are mentoring a lot, the BAM Fellows. And I think that's really good to be doing that too.
And you mentioned that you felt that Peter Robinson said the organizations are our lab. What made you interested in organizational psychology?
Well, I think that came from me in LA, because I came from this working class background. My dad was a barber, and I was first generation to go to university. So I had to work all the time. And one of the jobs I got when I was doing my MBA, the first year of my MBA, I needed to work. I had to work all the way through university because we don't have, US universities don't have grants and things like that. I mean, for less than 1% get them. And I didn't have a grant or anything, so I had to work. And I worked as a social worker in the city of Los Angeles in the Black community of Watts, South Central LA, and in the center of LA, which was where the homeless were. So I worked with them. And I did that for about 18 months to 2 years. I can't even remember now. The Bureau of Public Assistance, it was called. Can you believe it? Social Services Department. And I was the kind of only white guy working there. It was all for the Black community. And anyway, and I saw such deprivation that here I was going to be a rich tax lawyer. Like all my friends ended up being lawyers or accountants or things, all the guys I went to university with. And I just said, I can't do that. I got to do something that does something for somebody else a bit. I mean, I just, and so that, I think that influenced me more than anything, that exposure. And it's good in a way that a lot of people who go to university have to work and are not totally state funded, no matter which country you're in. I think it's important you work your way through university because you gain so much of your life and what you value. You create your value system comes from the exposure to not sometimes very pleasant things.
Yeah.
And it makes you think about how lucky you are and what can I do to help others, etc. All that kind of stuff.
So you got an interest in people at work, and you then pioneered work on the psychology of stress, and then that developed more widely into health and well-being in the workplace. How did you develop that topic, and particularly, how did you mainstream it within a business school?
Yeah, I don't know exactly how I mainstreamed it, by the way. I have not a clue. But anyway, let me start. We got asked, Judy Marshall was my PhD student at the time, and her and I were asked, she wanted to do something in organization psychology, and we were asked to go to a big global company based in London. It was one of the top 5 in the world at the time. And that one of their divisions, they couldn't get people to take on roles, senior roles. These were senior people to go to another country to work for their global empire. And when we went to, and so they said, would you do this research for us? I said, yeah, we'll do the research. And we thought Judy would do her PhD on that. And what had ended up happening is, as we were interviewing them, we heard them saying, who needs the stress? You know, my kids are in school, they're happy here. What do I want? Why do I want to take that on and get out of the mainstream, have to go to Germany or Asia or somewhere else? But we kept hearing the word stress, don't need the stress, don't need the stress. And that was before the word stress was, you know, au fait. I mean, it's a word that is now used by quite a lot of people for a variety of different things. So then she said, well, why don't we, so Judy and I were talking, we said, let's do it. Let's do your PhD on that. Yeah. I mean, let's, you know, it's fortuitous. So we went back to them and said, could we take a look at your top 200 senior people in this division of a global company? And we did. And that's the way it started. And then we wrote some articles and then wrote a book on it. And then once you get that, then you get the other occupations coming to you saying, hey, nobody's ever looked at us, nurses, doctors, blah, blah, blah. So it boomed that way. Not like I planned it, yeah. You know, but and I think that's the beauty of it, of our job. And we're very fortunate. All of us should be really fortunate that we have the job we have, because we can do the things we want to do within reason. And it's a wonderful profession. But open your mind, let things take you, rather than necessarily I planned it. I didn't plan it. And the next thing, I'm doing another piece of research on pilots, or I'm doing another piece of research on people in IT in the city of London. I mean, who knows where you're going?
I think that's a very good characterization of how research can take us in particular directions that we don't initially expect. My final question in this section is going to be asking you about, I think you're quite distinctive in having founded several institutions, bringing together people. For example, I know we'll talk about BAM a bit more later, but you've also been involved in founding the Sunningdale Institute with Civil Service, the National Forum for Health and Wellbeing in the Workplace. What is it that enables you to spot those needs, and how do you develop those networks?
Well, it's not necessarily that I'm necessarily proactive, although in some cases like BAM, I was proactive. At a swimming pool in San Diego at the Academy of Management meeting with all these British other academics saying, what are we doing here? And I said, let's form our own. So, you know, and I love forming new things. I love it. I enjoy it. I love the networking and getting things together and actually doing something. The government one, the Sunningdale Institute, came out of a group of permanent secretaries of government departments asked me to go and talk to them about, should we form a Kennedy School of Management in the UK? Should we have this really fantastic management school funded by government or something like that? And I said, why do that? Why do that? Why are you wanting to do this, government? And they said, well, we need help as government departments to deliver, you know, whatever the Department of Health, whatever business department, etc. We need to deliver. So we need advice on how to deliver. And maybe if we form like a Kennedy School at Harvard has, this would do it. I said, that'll cost you millions to get these and get up and running. Why not create a virtual one? Why not just get people from the top business schools to help you for nothing, zero? And they'll do it because they're consultants who make a lot of money, a lot of them, on their, you know, advising companies and even government, but mainly companies. Why not get them to come together? And the guy said, will you do this? I said, sure, I can do that. I know a lot of people in the business school. So that's how I started that. And then we ended up in the cabinet office to start with. And then the National School of Government took us over. And Gus O'Donnell was our head, our president, and I was the chair of it. and we free reign. So a government permanent secretary would say, I have this problem. I remember the cabinet office had a problem at one point in time, and they brought us in. And what we do is I picked the 5 or 6 people. I ended up getting about 30, 35. I can't even remember how many. There were about 35 covered, and several we had somebody from the US, somebody from Sweden. We had a few international, but mainly UK academics, really top ones, coming in, and in teams of like 4 or 5, say, we'll go to the cabinet office and do that and sort that problem out for them. And we'd spend a whole day with that government department and try to sort the problem out. Freewheeling, no money involved, just helping. And these guys loved it because they were influencing people. These guys and gals who were doing it were influencing people's behavior and influencing policy practice. So that was really good. I enjoyed that.
Yeah, another example of trying to have impact as well.
Oh,
yes,
yeah.
That's great. I'm going to hand over to Greg now. Greg is a professor at Monash Business School, which is in Australia, and he's also the research lead for the Future of Work research area within the Monash AI Institute. I'm sure that's doing really interesting work at the moment. He's also an honorary professor at Warwick University, and he's been served as president of several academies, including the International Federation of Scholarly Associations of Management, which is sometimes shortened to IFSAM. So, Greg, over to you now to talk with Cary.
Well, thanks, Jean. And just picking up your last question, Jean, and your comments about founding new institutions and organizations, Cary, you were one of the founders of IFSAM as well, that Jean has just mentioned, about 35 years ago. And I wonder if you could just say a little bit about that and what the potential you saw of founding this international federation was and is.
Yeah, what happened is I was then president of the British Academy of Management. And IFSAM we had a meeting, I think it was in Brussels. I can't even remember, but I think it was the first meeting we had was in Brussels. And AOM came, the president of the Academy of Management came, I came as president of the British Academy of Management, and others came. And they said, well, we should have a scholarly. We didn't know exactly why we wanted to do it exactly. I don't know I didn't initiate that. Somebody else did. I don't know who it was. But anyway, so I thought that was interesting. So I went and spent a couple of days there, 2 or 3 days, and we were talking about why do we want to do this? Maybe we could put on more. And remember, the British Academy was more British. The American was mainly more American at that time. Now I think in the Academy of Management now, I think they have more foreign, i.e. non-US members than they have US members now. But I may be wrong on that. So it wasn't global then, and all the academies tended not to be very global. The Australian one, the Australian one was around at that time. I think it probably was the Australian, New Zealand. But anyway, so we had this meeting there, and it was great, a lot of fun. They said, could you be the treasurer? I said, treasurer? Oh, okay, where are we getting the money from? And things. And I thought we needed really an accountant or finance guy to do that, but we didn't have one at the time. So I said, I did that for, I think, about a year. I can't remember how long it was until we could find a proper finance guy to do the work. But no, it was a good idea. Let's be more global. That was the idea behind it, that we were too insular, the British Academy was in Britain, the American was mainly US and Canada, not even much Canada at the time, I don't think. So that's how it started. And I thought it was a really good idea. But now it's different in the sense that AOM is global, even BAM is global. A lot of these ones are global too. We probably have the European, we're big in Europe now, BAM as well. So it's a different scenario, but at that time we weren't global, and I think it helped to make that happen.
Okay, thanks, Cary. And you have a huge media profile, even around the world. In Australia, when I switch on the radio and there's a discussion about stress, often I hear your dulcet tones coming in to make some comment about current issues in the management domain. Have you got any advice on developing a media profile? Any hints or advice on how you go about doing this sort of thing, Cary?
Okay, well, I mean, I wasn't really trained, and I probably should have been in early days, but in those days we didn't do that. You know, the comms departments in our business schools and our universities weren't very good at really doing the training for people way back when I first started. But I think we should all be, if you want to and you're motivated and you want to communicate your science and or you want to make comments on really important policies, practices that are going on, issues that are in the ether, big important issues in our society, then number one, link up with your comms department. Nowadays, they do training for everybody in all the business schools. Get trained, number one. Number two, work with them, issue press releases or whatever. Once you get on the pathway, you don't have to do anything after that because they put your name in a little black box somewhere and they draw your name out and they say Cooper is good on anything to do with the workplace. Greg is good on, strategy. They get it. And the more you do, and I think it's important for us because economists do it all the bloody time, right? Management people don't do it as much. And in the old days, they were very reticent to do it. But nowadays, I think universities need us to do impactful research, but also comment on things that are really important in our society, whether it's health in the workplace. I mean, for example, right now in most developed countries, roughly 50 to 60% of all long-term sickness absences are stress, anxiety, and depression. Anxiety and depression is the leading cause of long-term sickness absence in almost every developed country. Well, why? I mean, that's costing us a fortune. So what are we doing about it? It's at billions and billions. So we have to find a solution to that problem. That's for our research, but we should comment on what we could potentially do. So in the media, but I think our particularly management researchers have not been savvy enough. Economists have been overly savvy. They've been really good at doing this, but it's our time now, and the issues we have are big time. So I think I encourage as many people as want to get trained up, work with your comms people. This is a very important part of what you do. And then do the research that's impactful, but that's another issue we'll talk about maybe later.
Well, just picking up that issue, Cary, why is the impact of management research more important than publishing in 4-star journals, which is what many of our deans want us to be focusing on in practice?
But you can do it. You can do everything. You can do it all. Why can't you do it all? You can publish in 4-star journals, no problem. You play the violin, but doesn't mean you can't play jazz. I mean, we have to do things that are going to influence society we live in. We want to influence government policy. I'm really pleased, as I said earlier, about the ref in the UK and elsewhere, that a quarter of the evaluation will be on the impact that your research makes to the bottom line of organizations. I think that's really important. And so I think it's vital that we take a lead on this and do our stuff.
Are there any other ways, Cary, in which you would like to see management and business schools, research and education develop in the UK and internationally?
No, internationally, I think all of us have to make impact. We should be doing more impactful research rather than just titivating a bit of research that's been done and getting a 4-star publication. We ought to say to ourselves, the government's interested in these kinds of policies, right? So let's do some research to get the evidence to guide them in the right direction. Or organizations are moving in this direction. Let's find out if that's good. So say my field of well-being, for example. All the companies were doing what I call low-hanging fruit in that field. Okay, they were doing mindfulness at lunchtime. They were doing, ping pong tables and bean bags and the well-being day and massages at your desk and that kind of stuff, right? That's not really well-being. I love it. I don't mind massage at my desk. I don't mind, a smoothie and bean bags and the well-being day. That is not well-being. Well-being is about how you change the culture of the organization so that people feel valued, trusted, they can work flexibly if they want to, and they care to, and they can, given the nature of the role they play, and so on. It's about changing the culture of it. It's a strategic issue, not all these other fun things that everybody is calling, having well-being champions and all that kind of stuff. So I'm not demeaning them. I'm just saying that's not how you solve the problem of, in the UK, 2.9 million people are on long-term sick due to stress and anxiety and depression. That's a lot of people. How are we going to solve? We're not going to get rid of all of that, but why aren't we getting rid of some of that? What are we doing? That's our job. Our job is to do the research that makes a difference. It should be our job. Yeah, it does not mean you don't have to do a four-star journal article, 3, 4, whatever. So yeah, go into the journals, but try to do something, and then make sure you publish the stuff when you get it out in other media. You get it out in newspapers, you get it out in magazines, you get it out in talking to the BBC, talking to ABC, NBC, CBS, who knows? That's what we need to do. We need to get our field, our area of management seen to make a difference rather than just influencing our own career. And you might say it's easy for me because I'm a senior professor, but that's irrelevant. You can make a difference, and you still can, you can still publish in top journals and do the kind of stuff that other stuff you do. You can do it all.
Well, thanks, Cary. And just picking that up, and just before I hand back to Jean to ask a few more questions, let me pick up a question asked by Len, who's an independent scholar who submitted a question in advance. And he points out that when you and others founded BAM nearly 40 years ago, and the AOM was founded nearly 90 years ago, and we've had a huge amount of research on management and organizations in the intervening period. And nevertheless, we've seen massive organizational failures and scandals ranging from Grenfell Tower, the Post Office Horizon, contaminated blood products, failure by various agencies to stem and counter organized child sexual abuse, phone hacking, and too many more to count. All of these involve major organizations, and their managers have had the benefit from so-called modern management education built on scientific research. And Len comments that, or asks, is it fair to say there's something rotten in the state of organization and management research? Discuss, as we might say when setting an exam question. And
Okay.
thanks for your question.
I'm not sure that Len is meaning what we can't do this. What he's saying is we're maybe not doing it as much as we could. And I agree with that. We need to do more of that. We identify the problems that are really important. Take, for example, the whole issue of productivity at work. Big problem in the UK, big problem in a lot of countries, developed countries, by the way. So why aren't we tackling that? And we are. We now have a productivity institute in the UK, for example, but in other countries as well, the equivalent of that. Okay, let's get the science. Come on, let's have some fun. I remember when I did the Sunningdale Institute, I loved it when I'd go to these meetings with a permanent secretary and a team of 4 or 5 business school professors at leading business schools. And here's my problem, the guy would say, or the gal. They were both men and women in that level of permanent secretary, which are ahead of the civil service in the UK. And we had a whole day to work on the problem and come up with ideas and bring in, but we'd come in and bring in the research that was relevant and say, here are different options for you. 1, 2, 3, 4. Here's what the research says. They loved it and they took action. And that I think people got more out of that than being consultant to a company paying them in a way, because they were influencing a government and lots of people who are going to be the other end of that, either as customers, as patients in the Department of Health or whatever the department was. So I think it benefits everybody that we, collect the evidence, and we're good at doing that. And then talking to the media about it as well. Media comes to you and say, tell me about hybrid working. Is it working? Is it really working since the pandemic or not working? Well, come on. And there's a lot of research on that, tons of it. So we know the answer to the question. Well, get out there and give them the answer.
Thanks, Cary. Easier said than done, I guess, but interesting points. Thank you. And Jean, would you like to pick up a few more questions?
Yes.
And there's some been submitted, as you know.
Yes, and just following on from that, I mean, the Sunningdale Institute eventually got disbanded, but maybe it's time to revive it. Maybe there's I'd like to turn to a question from somebody called Nazim Setova, who says that they're a second-year PhD student at Queen Mary University of London. And they say they frequently draw on your work, Cary, on workplace well-being and leadership, because their study is looking at technostress coping in hospitality organizations in emerging economies. So the question is, given your work on workplace well-being and leadership, what forms of organizational support or leadership behavior do you believe are most effective in enabling frontline employees to cope with technology-induced stress in highly customer-facing sectors such as hospitality? So stress and hospitality.
I'll make a general statement because I've never actually done any work in the hospitality field, but I think I know a bit about what the issues are. But I think the most important thing, it was interesting when I formed about 7 years ago, a group of HR directors and chief medical officers, mainly chief medical officers, came to see me at Manchester, of global companies, BT, BP, etc. And they were chief medical officers and a couple HR directors. And they said, we need to have a place where we can, this is a national forum for health and well-being at work, where we can talk and do things rather than just sit in a meeting and talk about them. A lot of meetings are about well-being or health in the workplace, but nobody does anything. So we want to do things. I said, but you're very senior, you're C-suite people. How are you going to have the time to do anything? So just form it. We'll do it. All of us will make a difference. Anyway, now we have 55 global members of it. It's gigantic, and they help fund a PhD student who helps run it. She's no longer a PhD student. She actually is now a lecturer. She does it one day a week, and we meet quarterly and everything else. The point I'm trying to make about this is, at the very first meeting we had 7 years ago, by that time, we were about 15 different companies. We were going to have one in every sector. So an oil and gas one, telecoms, IT, whatever, all the various companies, retail, etc. And at the first meeting, I said, if you were to do one thing to improve health and well-being at work, what would you do? And this was to a group of 15, 20 HR directors, chief medical officers, directors of health and well-being. And they said, we deal with a line manager from shop floor to top floor. The problem, they said, we have is this: people are promoted to a line management role or recruited to a line management role based on their technical skills, not their people skills. In other words, we don't have many EQ'd line manager, emotionally intelligent line managers who have good social skills. People just appoint them, recruit them, and what we need is parity between those two skills. So go back to the question. The big issue, I think, in all workplaces is your health and well-being is a function to a large extent, not to a total extent, to a large extent, of how you're managed, right? And I think that's really fundamental. And my national forum has a plan for what we do and an idea. And we've talked to DWP, we've talked to different organizations about how we're going to get this sorted. And that's a problem that the business schools have. What business schools do is they do cognitive input in our brains. So we go and I do an MBA at UCLA, and what do I get? When I did it many years ago, I got everything about HR, about accounting and finance, about ops management, about all the different sub-subjects that we have that make up a business school. But it's all cognitive. Do we train these people who become, they're going back and they're wanting to do a managerial job, right? Some at more senior levels now, and some at just middle man, who knows what. And do we train them? Do we do experiential training? Do we give them information about whether they really are suited to manage other people? Psychologically suited to manage other people. So we don't do that. We don't actually do it. So we brought together, the National Forum brought together a number of business schools into the Department of, I think it was DWP at the time, I can't remember which department. And we said to them, what are you guys doing to change, to ensure that the people that you're dealing with, that you're educating, have these social skills, because they're vital as a manager, right? And almost every one of them, because I had told the department at the time, one of the ministers, that one of the issues we have is that all these business schools will say they're doing things, but they're not. They're doing things. What they're doing is they're doing all this cognitive input, but they're not doing a T group or some experiential approach to it so that you can determine whether you're suited to do a management role or not. Maybe you shouldn't. Maybe you should be just a technician, a technically driven person. You see what I mean, Jean?
Yeah,
and
interesting that takes you back almost to your PhD, doesn't it? With thinking about the importance of experiential work in the management field. So it sounds like you're saying to Nazim that in terms of leadership behaviors, thinking about social and emotional aspects of management as well as the cognitive aspects are really important. Is there anything particularly about techno-stress that you think?
Well, I've done work in the techno-stress field, and that's about emails. Incidentally, my national forum said at the very first meeting 7 years ago, number one, let's get more EQ'd line managers from shop floor to top floor. Let's do that. And business schools should be playing their role in that, and they're still not, and to a large extent, a bit, doing that thing. The second thing they said, and that surprised me, this is 7 years ago, emails are damaging people. The excessive email, we're not controlling it. It's going wild. Go to any university, how many emails? I mean, I opened my email this morning, I already had 30 or 40 emails. It's crazy stuff.
Yeah.
So we're not managing that. Techno-stress came out of that, by the way. It came out of, here's a technology that we can't do without. Emails are fantastic. However, we're not controlling it in any way. And the right to disconnect law that you have in Spain, Portugal, France, Germany, New Zealand, a number of countries now, is growing wider and wider, which it says, it depends, different countries have different law, different aspects to their law, but the law of the right to disconnect is about the law saying you as a manager are not allowed to send emails out of office hours to your subordinates unless it's absolutely essential, right? In other words, so people can have a bloody life. because and that was 7 years ago. These people, HR directors, chief medical officers, directors of health, were saying that's a big issue. Even then, we still haven't really dealt with it. And by the way, the UK government was going to pass legislation of some sort or another, guidance. I think it's guidance, and it was supposed to be in their first thing, but they didn't do it. But a number of countries have already introduced that. And you might say you shouldn't do that. I mean, people have to work 7/24. This is a global world, but you can damage people enormously if you don't have guidelines. We came up with guidelines, the National Forum, by the way, of what you should do. And those guidelines went to all the 40 to 50 members we have. We have 55 now. But
okay. I'm sure that's really helpful to Nazim, and I hope that good luck with your PhD, Nazim. Can we go to another question, and then I'll hand over to Greg. We've got somebody in the chat, in the Q&A section saying, and it goes back to the very early conversation we had about your talking, Cary, about the importance of having a mentor and having had one throughout your career. So the question is, how do you get a mentor if you don't have one already? And should PhD supervisors be mentors? So that sounds like that's somebody quite early in their career where having a bit of help would be really beneficial.
Yeah. Well, I mean, first of all, you have to say, is my supervisor, does he or she have the personality that would be transformed into being a mentor? Would they want to, or are they really technically driven people? You have to make that decision yourself. I personally think every PhD supervisor should be the mentor to their students, should look after them and be there for them. But it might not work because it's about a relationship thing, isn't it? Mentors is about, do you trust this person? Do you value them? Do they put their arm around you when you need it, et cetera, et cetera? And so I think if it's not your supervisor, I don't think supervisors should take PhD students on unless they're going to mentor them and be there for them. Otherwise, why are they doing it? Just to have more people to do so they can do less teaching? I mean, what is the purpose of it? Yeah. So I think they should. But if not, then you have to go find somebody. It might be another professor, might be a senior lecturer, might be just a lecturer. Could be anybody that you get on with, you can talk to about issues and get them out and resolve. We all need mentors, but I think all PhD supervisors should not take other people on unless they're going to be full-blown mentors to them.
Great. So that sounds like PhD supervisors should be mentors, but you may need to go more broadly as well. And actually later in your career, you probably do. Greg, do you want to pick up some questions? Because they're arriving in the Q&A box, and there's a number of them coming in. So do you want to do a few?
Thanks, Jean. There's one from Cordula in France, and she says that PhD research has changed a lot because of the current emphasis on publishing in highly ranked journals and the pressure on students to do that now, which wasn't the case when you and I, Cary and Jean, were doing our PhDs. So what's your advice to PhD students and young researchers today compared with in the previous generation? And I'll just relate that to your emphasis on impact and getting out there, Cary, which is possibly more challenging for people at the start of their career than it is for people who are already established, as you are so well established. It's in a sense, younger people might say, it's easier for you, Cary, to go out and do that sort of stuff. What's your advice now?
Okay, I think for the younger people, look, if you want to do jazz music, it's nice if you start with a little bit of classical music, right? So maybe, learn about how to write articles for journals, right? And there's no problem with that. And you should publish in all sorts of journals, not just ones that are 4-star. And particularly when you're young, trying to go into that is, I think, difficult because the acceptance rate's usually around 10%, isn't it? It's not very high, lower than 10% in many of them. So it's not, so publish, you have to learn. To become a jazz musician, ultimately, I think it's great if you do the classical music first. So learn how to do the publications, write them up, and that's your supervisor should help you do that as well, and publish those kind of articles. I think you're absolutely right. The impact, but I know a lot of young people who are doing impactful things now. Even on their PhD, it's impactful. So it doesn't have to be that you have to just do a little minor iteration of citizenship behavior, organizational citizenship behavior, and then go to a journal that does this stuff a lot, put it in, and hope to God you can get published. You know, but you have to learn your trade first, and how to write articles is part of the role, by the way, of the supervisor to help that person do that and understand where it should go, how it should be structured, and all of that. But it doesn't mean you can't still do impactful things. You can't do, when you're doing your PhD. A lot of PhDs now are very impactful. People are, you know, doing things that really make a difference. And certainly in climate change and the whole range of fields, and in our own as well. But you do have to know the basics as well. You have to know how to publish. You have to, that's part of the training that supervisors should be doing for you as well.
Thanks, Cary. And there's a question from Dennis in the Q&A, who says that when he was a younger scholar, which he no longer is, he was asked by the then director of the school's MBA program why his research area in risk and crisis management was relevant to the MBA program. And he says that whilst that silo-based mindset in MBAs has thankfully changed, his question is, should business education become more of a systems-based discipline in order to refocus on the challenges of practice that invariably do not have a single root cause in socio-technical systems?
A complex question. I'm not quite sure exactly what he's wanting. Dennis, I'm not quite sure what you're wanting me to say. But no, look at, I don't know whether it should be a systems-based orientation or not. I think really you should do what drives you, what you really care about as a person, and you think there's a gap somewhere and things, a problem needs to be solved. That's what you should do. The good news now is we don't have to do like I had to do, go to libraries all the time, looking up journals in libraries. It's all on there for you. You can find where the gaps are and in areas that you're interested in, do that work. Whether it should be a systems approach or not, I don't know. All I know is the more passion you have on the subjects you're doing, the better, the more committed you'll be, and doing something that interests you and your supervisor, because it's a team effort in a way. When you're a PhD student, your supervisor is quite important. But really important. I remember when Jean first came to me and she wanted to take a look at managers and why when they were made redundant, they were unprepared to talk about it with their partners even. And the issues about family, it was about family. And she was really keen on it. And it was really an interesting topic. I thought this is great stuff. Let's do it. But it is a dynamic relationship, isn't it? It should be one mentoring. You know, PhD supervisors are the most important part of your career development. You get the right one who really cares about you, values you, trusts you, and so on, and gets where you want to go. Then you're on a good career path.
Let me pick one more question up, Cary, and then I'll pass the talking stick back to Jean. That's what the Aboriginals in Australia call it, having not a microphone, but it's a talking stick.
You're a talking stick now, Jean.
And there's a question from Helen Smith, who says she totally agrees with your point about EI and the personality of managers. Therefore, if you were to use a psychometric tool to assist with this decision making, which tool would you use as part of the mix?
Oh, well, there's several EI and tools. I don't know. I haven't done research particularly on EI itself. I've done social skill training, and I look at, but there's a whole range of ones. I just look at them. They're out there. There's not like any one EI measure.
And Cary is frozen for me. Has he frozen for others as well, or can others hear?
No, I think you're frozen.
Oh, okay. So,
No, I can't recommend any particular one, but find the best one for depending on what you want to look at
yeah.
in emotional intelligence, and find the one that suits whatever your design is all about.
Okay. I'll pass back to Eugene.
Thank you. Cary, we've touched on PhDs and PhD supervision a number of times this morning. I wonder whether you might say something about what you think supervisors should, but also shouldn't do to help their PhD students. And also, have you got any advice for PhD students about how to get the best from their supervisor?
Wow. Okay. I think once you take somebody on, you're taking on a member of your family, in effect. And I think you have to mentor them, look after them, make sure that you're available whenever. I think that's been a problem for quite a lot of PhD students I hear, is I don't get to see my supervisor very often, or I don't feel like I want to disturb him or her or whatever. And really, that's not right. Really, you have to be open. So you have to be there, and you have to really help guide them, because they could pick a subject or a research design that will not be successful, and you have to help them all the way along the line. And if you can't, and if it doesn't work, you get another supervisor. I mean, really, they are critical for your PhD. And but if you're a supervisor for somebody, you've got a real responsibility. It's not just another another X mark in the box that I now have 6 PhD students, and bring them together as a team as well. I think that's really important. Bring your PhD students together, make a team. That's a lot of fun as well, and you can publish jointly and with them as well. So I think but I think we all know that that's a big issue. Unfortunately, some people get stuck with a supervisor who just doesn't deliver, not available enough. And I think if you have that, you have to get out, find somebody else.
What do you think the PhD students themselves can do to get the best out of their supervisor? What might they try and do?
Well, I mean, I think they have to go to their supervisor whenever they have any problems. Don't just say, "Oh, I don't want to trouble Professor Cooper or Professor Bamber. I don't really." He's a busy person. If he or she takes you on, that's their responsibility. Go as often as you need to go, and do the business. I mean, that's my job. Otherwise, I shouldn't be taking somebody on unless I'm prepared to be open and be there available for them. I think we all know that. But the difficulty, some people get lumbered with somebody who just is very distant, and then you have to leave.
Or find other people who can help you alongside the supervisor. Perhaps that's the
Absolutely.
other option, I guess.
If you have no other option, then you find somebody else who can help you.
Yeah. We've got another questions come in. It's come in from Fratika from the Indian Institute of Technology. And they are working on the concept of digital well-being. And this person says they've yet to find the true shape of digital well-being in the organizational psychology literature. So have you got any advice on that about how
Yeah.
to investigate digital well-being?
Okay, I think that's happening more and more, but I think in some ways, when you say digital well-being, it tends to mean individual orientated approaches. So doing EAPs, employee assistance programs, counseling services online, either online or in a hybrid model or virtually, face to face, like we're doing right now. So I think they're available now. What we're finding on that, though, I think, is that people can't talk to a counselor online, for example. They need face to face, and there's a move away from. For some people, they like the online, particularly the virtual online, where I can talk to you now, Gene. I'm seeing you, you're seeing me, and you're counseling me. But I presume that's what they mean by digital well-being. How do you help an individual digitally? But I think just giving them a platform and saying, go on and use this technique is not the answer for them. I think if people need help, they need eyeball to eyeball help mainly. But okay, you and I are seeing each other. You could be my counselor, and that's fine. That might work. But I've noticed, and I'm involved with an EAP. I'm helping them as an advisor, and I notice that they're getting more demands for face-to-face. And the counselors think that's important too. And certainly just doing it, but without face-to-face, even virtually without face-to-face, I don't think that's going to work very well. So when you talk about health and well-being, you're talking about the individual. They need help, and they need real help, face-to-face help.
Great. I hope that's a helpful comment to our Indian colleague there.
Could I just pick up your comment about employee assistance programs, Cary, there, EAP, which many organizations are promoting. If people have issues in the workplace, they're referred on to ring this number to talk to the EAP counselor provider. And that seems to me, I'd be interested in your thoughts about this, Cary. It seems to me kind of irresponsibility on the part of managers outsourcing the counselling to a third party rather than trying to address the cause of the issue, which may well be poor leadership, bad management, or bad organizational structure, or workload overload, or whatever. Any reflections on that?
EAPs have been around a long time, came from the US about 30 years ago. I did a big study for the HSE on EAPs in the UK, and they are pretty effective. They help an individual with their problem, but they don't get at the organizational issues. They may help the individual look at the challenges they personally face because they're suffering from stress, depression, or anxiety. And that's the basic reason they go to EAPs. And it might help them, and it might mean that that the counseling indicates that they should actually leave their job. Forget about staying there. The organization, the fit between them and the organization just doesn't work anymore. Okay, that's fine. But it doesn't, and the research showed, but it doesn't change some of the underlying, which is what you're saying, Greg, problems the organization has, like a bullying management style in a particular part of the business, or a long hours culture in another part of the business, or lack of progress for women in the workplace in terms of getting up higher the hierarchy. Those are fundamental issues. I think today's EAPs are broader than that, are getting broader. They're saying we have to also look at the underlying issues. In other words, we have to take the metrics, get the data that we collect from our customers, our clients, and then feed it back to the organization, not their names, by the way, but generally 32% of people coming to us from that part of the business feel they're being bullied. So you've got a problem and you have to deal with that problem. A good EAP would do that and give feedback back to the organization that, and that part of the business, women feel career blocked. And that part of the business, a long hours culture. Another part, they're sending emails to people while they're on holiday at night, And we're finding all this information. And good EAPs collect that data, feed it back to the organization. Some of the EAPs actually start doing organizational interventions or help them sort out the organizational intervention the organization needs to perform.
Thanks, Cary. And forgive me, Jean, I interrupted your flow there to pick up that point. And we've probably only got time for one or two more questions now. Did you wish to pick anything up, Jean? If not, there's one I'll pick up.
I think there's one in the Q&A, and we may need to make this the last one, but it's from Alif Leila, who's a first-year PhD student at the University of Stirling. And they're interested in understanding how leadership shapes workplace experiences, particularly in hybrid work settings. And so what forms of leadership are most inclusive in hybrid work settings? And to what extent is belonging a component of well-being? So it's about inclusion in hybrid settings.
Yeah. The hybrid stuff, I care a lot about that. Well, about flexible working, let's call it that. By the way, there's a difference between hybrid and flexible. Flexible is when a line manager says to their subordinate, what would you like to do? How would you like to work? When would you like to come in? And hear from me as manager, here's when I'd like you to come in, and you set a psychological contract between the two of us. By the way, that's not hybrid working, that's flexible working. That's the ideal state. Evidence shows that that one is most effective, but done least often. What is normally done is you come in 2 days a week or 3 days a week, and we pick the day you're going to come in, and that's it, right? And so I think we have to clarify that. Okay, the best management style is one where you have this psychological contract between you and each member of your staff. Hard work, time consuming, but effective. All right. And I know it's problematic for quite a lot of managers. So for me, the manager is pretty, in the world we're in now, let's call it the hybrid world, the line manager is very fundamental here. You don't have good EQ as a line manager, EI, you're dead. You're dead because people are not in all the time. How do you manage a team? How do you think about it? So if you have good social skills, good interpersonal skills, good EQ, then you will do the business. It will work because you are aware, hey, it looks like so-and-so Janet is on the periphery. I'll go talk to Janet. I'll go online with her. I'll bring her in. I'll do this, that, and the other. That's why it's so important. In the hybrid world now, the line manager is even more significant than pre-hybrid world, i.e. before the pandemic. So very, very important stuff. And I think as long as we move in the direction of having parity between people's technical skills and people skills in managerial roles from shop floor to top floor, we're all going to be all right. We're going to be happy bunnies.
Well, that's a very good place to perhaps stop. So I'm going to hand over now to Fiona.
Okay, thank you very much. So thank you to all the participants today, but particularly to Greg and Jean for handling the questions, for preparing so carefully the questions and communicating and agreeing in the questions. I think they did an excellent job, and to Amber for managing in the background, managing all the technical issues for us. Cary, that was such a good masterclass. I mean, that to me just epitomized exactly what I think a masterclass should be about. You have this incredible wealth of knowledge and experience in the workplace, and you've been able to communicate some of your best lessons today. And so I really think it was so insightful and such a great contribution, and just absolutely fabulous. Thank you so much for what you've been able to do today.
Thank you very much, Fiona. That's very kind of you.
Not at all.
And thank you.
Thank you, Jean
Yes.
and Greg, too. You're great.
Well, really
Well, she's a
enjoyed it.
PhD student of mine. She would be great. She's fantastic.
She is.
I survived.
And
Good.
thanks
Thank
for all
you,
the
Cary.
questions. Thanks. Apologies. I know there were a range of other interesting questions that people had submitted that we didn't get to, but we'll be having some more BAM Fellows Masterclasses in the new year, and encourage you to come along and participate in those. And no doubt we'll pick up some of these issues in future masterclasses. So thank you, Fiona, Jean, Cary, and everyone online around the world. Good on you.